differentiation. So leveraging a variety of big data approaches to really disrupt their markets. We are not like a Y Combinator where you give 23K space, internet, secretary. It's a much, typically our companies are business focused, not consumer focused or marketplace focused. And we tend to invest a larger amount of capital, 1.5 to 3 million, right in the beginning. But we start with people, with founders, entrepreneurs who have a concept and work closely with them. Take them from sort of concept to the product or service out in the market. And we have I saw some of our founders here. So Satish Krishnamurthy from Deep Forest Media. I saw him earlier. Where are you, Satish? He's missing. So, and our CTO, Lance, is also here. Lance is right there. So we have a CTO, data scientist in residence. A number of you heard him talk a few weeks back, Russell Journey, guy with the big beard. So we have a number of operating individuals who work with our companies once we decide to fund them. So if you are thinking about starting a company that uses data, reach out to us at info@hivedata.com. These are functional areas, so much of our focus is on applications that are data-driven. So those are some functional areas and also some vertical areas where we are especially interested in finding entrepreneurs to support them in creating companies.
Education is not up there.
Education is not there. So, however, if there's strong set of, so what that means is that we are not big experts in education, whereas in some of these other areas we have people who are experts. So if you have a well-packaged idea, you have the expertise, something that we can embrace. We are not experts in the area. Hopefully through a few events like this we'll become experts. Our companies are hiring, so we are looking for Java engineers, Hadoop engineers, DevOps people, UX people, data science people. So if any of you are interested, reach out to us at jobs@hivedata.com. And so be part of the conversation on Twitter today. So the hashtag is HiveData. If you put the hashtag, others will also see it. There's a lot of people following it who are not here today, who are following on Twitter, so be a part of it. I'm very excited to have this event today. It's something that's close to many people's hearts. It's a passion for many people. And we have a great set of thought leaders representing some great companies that are emerging in this overall category of education technology, online education, the use of data to, once you can measure something, you have an opportunity to actually improve it. So the use of data to create, the courses, to figure out which ones are better than not, use gamification techniques, and so on and so forth that you'll hear today. I'd like to introduce Tony Van, who is going to be the moderator for the evening. We'll have a brief presentation by starting with Tony, and then each of the panelists. And following that, we'll have a panel discussion, and then we'll have a Q&A where you can also participate. Tony is at EdSurge, which is a media outlet covering the latest in education technology, all the innovation going on. And he previously was editor at the Stanford Journal of East Asian Affairs. Wow, that's interesting. and very importantly, a recipient of Forbes Top 30 Under 30 Award. So please join me in welcoming Tony.
Great. So thanks everybody for coming out tonight. How are we all doing tonight?
Great.
Awesome. So I'm really honored to have this opportunity to facilitate this discussion about a topic that I'm very passionate about. It's the revolution in online education, and as we know, revolutions are always sexy topics, regardless of the industry that we talk about. So a little bit about EdSurge, if you haven't heard about us. We are an online community and resource for the latest news, developments, and trends in the education technology industry. And so the three audiences that we really want to connect are the educators, entrepreneurs, and the investors, and to help them make better decisions in the edtech industry. So as the managing editor, I cover news regarding the new companies that are building new products, as well as the schools and teachers, students that are using some of these products, along with the investors who may be funding both of these companies and the schools themselves. And so we do this in a couple of ways. We consider ourselves as a news outlet, and we have a website at edsurge.com. This is a snapshot of what our homepage looked like this morning. And we also have weekly newsletters that we send out in case you don't want to always be clicking refresh on the website. So these go out on Wednesdays and Thursdays. There is one newsletter that goes out for the entrepreneur audience in the edtech industry, and there's one on Thursday that's more geared for teachers who want to learn more about what kinds of available tools are out there and how some of their peers are using them. And the third thing that we have on our site is what we call the EdTech Index, which is essentially a database of all of the companies and products that we cover in the course of the news. So currently we have about 800 tools and products cataloged in this index, and we see this as really a sort of consumer reports, to help people make sense and find the latest edtech products out there, and to also see some reviews and what other people are saying about their efficacy and their usage. Another thing that we're doing new this year in 2014 is we're holding summits, which are essentially events where we bring together about 20 to 30 local companies with the local school districts. So the pictures that you're seeing here are from our summit in Silicon Valley that we held last November at the Computer History Museum. So we brought about over 30 companies and 600 teachers and administrators all in one room for one day of hands-on demos and for conversations, so that a lot of entrepreneurs need some feedback on how to better refine their tools as well. So that's EdSurge in the gist. If you check out our website, you'll see, it will be a good way for you to stay up to date on all the latest news, as well as the local events like this that are happening, as well as job opportunities as well, because we have a jobs board where a lot of education companies are posting openings as well. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. And so now we're going to go, I'd like to introduce some of our panelists this evening. And I think what's really great about the composition of this panel is that the panelists really represent a range of learners, with regards to the tools that they're building. So everything from early childhood, to K-12, to college, and to continuing education as well. And so I'd like to introduce them and allow them to just share briefly about some of the work that they're doing. And the first panelist is Cheng Tao from Codecademy.
Hello everyone. So my name is Chen Tao and I work at Codecademy. So I do growth and I do business intelligence as well as building machine learning models at Codecademy. Prior to Codecademy, I was an engineer at Google, LinkedIn, and Square. So I've been building machine learning model and as well as infrastructures. So okay. So to get everybody on the same page, I want to talk about, share with everyone about what we believe, what our vision is. So we believe coding is something easy for everyone to pick up. As you probably are all aware that a lot of people, they self-taught themselves about Ruby and Python, build some nice tool websites. It's really phenomenal. And we believe everybody can do that. It's not a privilege for CS majors. And also, we believe coding is one of the highest rewarding skill you can learn, and because it's easy to learn. And imagine, I'll give you an example. Imagine you have a CPA, and if they can just automate the tax calculator for their clients, how many more clients they can take? It'll be very, very valuable for CPA to learn. I suppose if there are any CPA in the room, so use Codecademy. And also, we believe in learn by doing, not learn by reading. And we believe we need a new, completely different environment to teach coding. So for those of you who haven't seen Codecademy before, this is a screenshot. It's one of our exercises. And you can see like at the left-hand side, we have some instruction. And on the right-hand side, you have interactive editors. You can just code there, and you will receive immediate feedback through that preview panel at the top right corner. And if you do things right, great, you'll see it. If you do things wrong, you will see it right away. So more importantly, how we use data. So everybody kind of have different idea about how they want to use data. But in my view, I think there are 4 different areas. So one is use data to understand your business and use your data to understand your customer. What I mean by that is there are a lot of things you want to know, like say whether your site is growing organically or through some PR campaign. How's your retention rate? How well is your user engaging with your site? And do they convert to paying customer, or do they convert to, do they just churn? So what drives the difference? So you can use data to answer those questions. And also, of course, you can use data to build machine learning product upon. And the last one is probably the most controversial one, how do you use data to drive product decision? So in my view, I believe your product is kind of like a communication channel between your team and your users. So whenever you make a change to your product, you're kind of asking your users, oh, so here's what we believe, this change would be great for you. And you send this message through your product, and your users receive that message and they'll respond. Some users will respond oh, so with their Facebook and oh, I love it, I hate it. Or some people will respond using Twitter. But those are mostly those are response from minority of your users, the louder users. And there's another way you can collect feedback from majority of your users with data. So, but you just need to design your features carefully so that you can, at the end of the day, you will be able to filter out noise from your signals and make sure you make a unbiased decision. And of course, why our data? So in my opinion, a little bit about what I did before. I work on payment fraud detection at Google and Square. I work on search relevance in LinkedIn. And I think education is still the area which a lot of innovation is needed. And I would rather to be in the industry where I can contribute to innovate rather than applying some technology a lot of people have solved 5 years ago. So yeah, it's a personal choice, but I think the former is much cooler. And second, I think we all believe in online education, personalizing is the key, is the promise that online education will bring to our users. And why Codecademy? Because we have very rich data, and which is the code everybody submits, and we track those codes. And you can imagine, if you're learning code, whenever I can tell whether a user repetitively make the same syntax mistake. I can do some stacking analysis about if the user code have a lot of branches, and do they name their variable properly? So I know a lot about the users, and therefore I can do a lot more data. It's richer data for me to do better analysis, and that's why I believe Codecademy can do a much better personalization job than most of the other companies. And I think that's all. Actually, so we are in New York, and we are hiring. If you are interested in working in New York, let me know.
Great, thanks, Chantel. Hold on to the mic and just get the seat, whichever you want. Next up, we got Dan Carroll, who is one of the co-founders and COO from Clever.
Hi, so like Johnny said, I'm Dan. I'm one of the founders at Clever. But just a few years ago, I wasn't Dan. I was Mr. Carroll. I was an 8th grade science teacher in Denver, Colorado, working with a student population that was 90% free and reduced lunch and 90% Latino. And as a science teacher, I realized that it was really tough being a teacher today. And this is something, if you go and talk to any teacher today, you'll hear that it's a challenging job. And one of the challenges that particularly bothered me is that when I looked at my students, I saw students who were really pretty much ready for college. They were reading, they were fantastic. You know, no matter what I tried to teach them, they were already 2 steps ahead. And then I also had students in my classroom, you know, sitting right next to these students who were basically ready for college, who were really behind. They were still struggling with English, they were still struggling to read. And somehow I had to try to teach all these students at the same time. And it was pretty much impossible. Definitely impossible if I was sitting in front of the classroom like I am right now, you know, writing stuff on the whiteboard and trying to have everyone do the same problems at the same time. So this is exactly the personalization problem that we just heard about in Codecademy, but it was very real to me. And I realized that if I wanted to actually teach my students where they needed to be, if I wanted to give them the instruction that was right for them, I couldn't do it alone. I couldn't teach 30 different lessons while sitting in front of the classroom. I needed some help, and I thought technology might be the solution. So I did some research, and I learned about things like blended learning and you know, digital learning, and I learned that there's a lot of great software out there that can really help students learn. And so I got really excited, and I got some trials for some programs. I read about things in EdSurge. I really did. EdSurge was a huge impact on me as a teacher. And I tried to blend my classroom. I tried to give let my students learn some things on the computer, and also supplement that by pulling out small groups and helping them learn using myself where the technology had gaps. And what I found, though, is that I was hoping that this would be the environment. I'd pop kids down in the computer lab. They would be really engaged and motivated. They'd be learning at their own pace, and I'd be able to pull out and supplement where needed. But instead, it looked like this. As soon as we walked in the computer lab, I would have a sea of hands go up, and I'd hear a range of complaints. Mr. Carroll, I can't log in. Or Mr. Carroll, I can't get started. Or Mr. Carroll, I don't have an account. And what I found is that there's so much potential for technology and education. It really could be the thing that allows every student to learn at their own pace. But today, there are so many barriers that get in the way of that really taking place in the classroom. And I certainly felt those barriers as a teacher. Just things like making sure every student has the right account, that they're in the right class, and that they know their username and password. Those things can really derail a lesson. And for me, they meant when I tried to use technology in my classroom, I was more of an IT firefighter and less of a highly leveraged teacher. And so this is something you'll hear if you go talk to any teacher today. So actually, based on that frustration, I left the classroom, I got promoted, and I became the tech director for the schools that I had taught at. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm the tech director, I can fix this problem. I can get systems to talk to each other. I can make this easy and allow technology to save teachers time rather than creating more hassles. But what I found as a tech director is that the problem didn't go away. In fact, it magnified. So instead of being responsible for my 100 students and getting them sync, I was now responsible for the entire school district. And instead of spending my nights and weekends making sure data was synced, I was spending my entire time, all of my time. And the reason that it was so time-consuming is that education's behind. If you look at industry or finance or other verticals, education does not have some of the same systems and platforms that these industries have. And so when my school district wanted to use 5 pieces of software, that meant that I was manually entering students into 5 different places. And if a student's class schedule changed, I had to go change that in 5 different places. It was infuriating and frustrating, and it meant that we not only struggled and wasted time with the products that we were using, but we weren't able to be innovative. When we read about a great product in EdSurge, we couldn't go put it in the classroom the next day because it just took too much time. So I thought, well, there has to be a better way. We used a system, a database, PowerSchool, made by Pearson. It's a pretty common student information system. And that kept track of all the really core data about my schools. And I said, why can't I just go to these vendors, these folks that we're using inside of our school, and just get them all to connect to this core database? If I could do that, then that would save so much of the time and effort, and it would make sure that students were in sync, that they had their accounts, they're in the right place. So I went to the vendors and I said, come on guys, let's just connect to PowerSchool. Couldn't we just make this really easy? What they said is, Dan, it's not that easy, because if you look at it from our perspective, it's not just one system we need to connect to. There's a whole range, and I have 5 up here, but I mean the schools use hundreds of different types of databases. And they said, we'd love to do great integrations, but if we started working on that, that's all we would do, and we wouldn't be able to make great learning applications, stick to our core competency. And so then that's when we really realized that maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's this is the opportunity that someone could come in and kind of fix this problem. And so the solution is Clever. And so what Clever does is it connects really easily for schools. So for people who have my own position, who are tech directors in school districts, they can connect Clever to their database in just a few minutes. It's pretty miraculous. And then once they have Clever connected, they can add applications, whatever kind of learning applications their students need, with just a couple clicks. It takes literally just a couple clicks to add a new application. And so this problem that I spent hours and hours and nights and nights and weekends working on gets solved through automation, through technology. And by focusing just on this problem, this is what Clever does, along with a couple, and we're growing. We're able to do this in a way that no one else has ever been able to do this in education. So just a really quick kind of review of how Clever works. Schools connect Clever to their database, a place where they're already keeping track of students and teachers. Clever syncs really quickly, kind of turns their data to a standard format. And then we have this API that allows application developers to connect and create accounts for students and teachers automatically. So you don't have that worry about systems getting out of sync. You don't have tech directors or secretaries or teachers spending all their time updating different systems. So just a kind of quick to show you what this looks like. If I'm a school district and I'm signing up for Clever for the first time, I go to this website, I fill out this really, really simple form. I'm syncing in 5 minutes. I have my applications. I can add more applications if I want. And school districts are doing that. Thanks to great press and great innovators, there's more and more great software to use in the classroom. And Clever is helping make sure that that actually gets used in an easy way. Creates, increases efficiency, doesn't decrease it. So just a quick bit about our business model, because it's kind of interesting. Schools don't pay for Clever. Developers, people who are making edtech applications, they're the ones who they license our technology, and they pay us based on the number of schools that they're using Clever to sync. We help them out by giving them nice and clean data, and everyone benefits because products actually get used. One of the biggest kind of untold secrets in K-12 education is that many purchases get made and then never implemented just because there's data challenges getting systems to talk to each other. We've been really successful. The company is just about 1.5 years old. We're working with over 100 applications in the K-12 space and doing this connection for over 15,000 schools. So it was pretty crazy. I remember when we were in 5 schools, and those are the ones that I worked at, and we've grown pretty tremendously since then. So just a kind of quick recap of what Clever does, what it means. For teachers, all of a sudden you can trust technology. You can bring software into your classroom, and you can know that when you try a new tool, it'll work, and your students will be able to access it. If you're a developer, you get to focus on your core competency. You get to build the best reading application or learning to code application in the world, and you don't have to worry about things like systems integration that would distract you and keep you from growing. And if you're a student, the benefit is that you don't have to sit in the computer lab with your hand raised for 15 minutes waiting for your teacher to come and manually adjust your account. You get to go in and do some really great online learning, and your teacher gets to come and look at the data, see how you're doing, and really help you grow. So that's a kind of quick overview of what we're doing at Clever. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Dan. And next up, we've got Dan Arena, who is the co-founder and the chief learning scientist over at Codecademy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dylan. So, as Tony said, I'm with Codecademy.
Is your mic on?
Is my mic on? Yeah.
Yes.
Our mission is learning to change the world. The way we do that is with the first product called Leo's Pad, which is a series of interactive animated stories for preschoolers. They play them on their iPad, and it's a series that's built on top of a comprehensive early learning curricular framework. So across the sort of 6 to 12 months that a kid is engaging with this series, they're covering roughly 90 dimensions of learning that are sort of everything a kid needs to be, well, a kid and a parent need to be aware of to be ready for 21st century learning. Adaptive learning is a key part of how we can serve 2.5-year-old kids and 5.5-year-old kids, because they're hugely different, as anyone who's ever seen a 2.5-year-old and 5-year-old knows. The stories have a set of opportunities for the learners to engage with the characters, and they will help the characters solve problems, but the way that they do that might differ. So in this example, we're making an eyepiece for a telescope for Galileo. For some learners, doing that might involve putting together a puzzle with 4 pieces, like this. For other learners, the same challenge might look like this, because we want to optimally challenge every single learner, find out where they are, map their progress, and keep them on that learning edge. The second part of what we do is actually the more significant part of what we do. From the kids' perspective, they're just engaging with great content, they're having fun with some characters, but what we're doing all through is we're measuring that progress and supporting it. And one of the key levers for improving outcomes for young kids is parental engagement. So a big part of what we're doing at Codecademy is building an engagement loop with parents. We call it Parents Pad. And with Parents Pad, you can see what your learners are up to, but you can also see how they're progressing along, as I said, nearly 90 dimensions of learning, and more importantly, what you can do to support that learning outside of tablet time. So it's not simply your kid is in the 57th percentile for X, Y, and Z. It's no, your kid is working on mental shape manipulation, and here is an activity that you can do with them to support that outside of tablet time. We can engage with parents, web, tablet, we're coming soon with the phone option. And all of that is powered by an adaptive learning framework. The adaptive learning framework is general. We consider Leo's Pad to be a source of evidence about learner competencies, and Parents Pad is a way that we can report our analyses of those competencies. But we are working toward a future in which there are several sources of evidence coming in about learner behaviors, learner preferences, learner passions, learner weaknesses, learner challenges. We are the psychometric layer that analyzes all of those disparate sources of evidence, makes sense of them, unifies them into a coherent learner model, makes meaning from them, and reports that back both to the stakeholders, the teachers, the parents, and eventually the learners themselves, and also to the content providers, because the benefit to them is right now they see a small slice of the elephant, right? You have a great experience for a kid, but it's a very small part of that kid's learning life. So you get a tiny measurement of that learner, and you have to do your best with it. When they work with us and they're integrated with ALF, they're getting to see a much richer picture of who that learner is, and they can tailor their offerings to that richer picture. The broader vision that we're working toward is what we call a mosaic of a learner, and it's sort of a pie-in-the-sky, halcyon future in which, as a child grows through life, they're having learning relevant experiences all over the place, in school, out of school, they're having counseling sessions, they're going to summer camps, they might be working with therapists on various things, they might be going to gifted and talented retreats. Whatever it is, we want to help capture a single, universal model of that learner and help the stakeholders at every stage of that learner's growth figure out what the best next step is for the learner. That's it.
Great. Thank you very much, Dylan. Last but not least, we have Tom, who is the analytics lead over at Coursera.
Thank you very much. All right. Okay, great. So I'm Tom. I lead the analytics team at Coursera. So the analytics team is a subgroup of our engineering team more broadly at Coursera. And we do a number of different things. We focus on everything to do with data. So I'm not sure that's really a focus. But Coursera in general, let's see here. Coursera in general is a website that allows you to take college-level classes online for free. So we partner with about 108 different partner institutions, partner universities, and we provide classes that are essentially on par with the best classes that you can find anywhere. They cover a wide range of fields. I believe the total number of classes that we've offered to date is in the order of like 400 to 500 or so. So what is Coursera all about? It's about connecting the world with a great education, okay? And by this I mean a number of things. So first, we're really interested in the problem of how can we improve student learning? How can we engage learners? How can we make them more motivated to complete their courses? But also we're interested in the teaching aspect of things. So how can we use data to impact how professors or teachers or instructors modify their classes in order to improve the learning experience. And finally, a big area that we care about is impact. So there's a lot to do with engaging learners or improving pedagogy, but all of it means nothing if it doesn't actually have real-world impact. And so for us, real-world impact means things such as actually transforming people's lives, giving them opportunities that they simply did not have before. So I'm going to talk a bit about a couple of the ways that we think about the usage of data at Coursera. And I'll highlight three particular ways. So the first way here is I say that data informs how we build products. Okay. So what I've shown here are three graphs. So the first graph on the left here gives you a sense of the rough age distribution of students in one of our machine learning classes. Okay. So you end up with a lot of people in their 20s to 30s. The bottom graph shows you something about the relative age distribution of folks who take our introduction to philosophy class, and clearly it's a very different demographic. Apparently, people like to gaze at their navels when they're either really old or really young, but in between you're maybe a little bit too busy. So clearly, from the two graphs on the left, we have a wide variety of different students who come in to take Coursera classes. And when we think about how we construct our classes, we have to make sure that we tailor the content to the diverse range of learners that are coming in. On the right side, I've shown something about the actual behavior of students in our classes. So the right side shows a heat map that's aggregated over something like 80 different Coursera courses or so. And what it shows is level of activity for different students. So the x-axis is, say, the number of assessments that a student has completed. The y-axis is the number of lectures that a student has watched. And the color is some indication of how many students have accomplished some particular pair of, this many assessments or this many lectures. And so you see a wide variety of different behaviors here. So in the top right, you see people who have done all the lectures and done all the assessments. On the left, you see those folks who have perhaps watched all the lectures or at least some of the lectures, but may have decided to not do any of the assessments. And in the middle, you can also see kind of these traces where students do 1 or 2 assessments, give up, but still watch all the lectures anyway, right? So you can see those vertical lines there. So lots of different behaviors, and by understanding how our users behave on our site, then we can hopefully better improve our product. So besides informing how we build product, data also drives the product in many ways. So on the left here, I've shown something that's probably fairly typical of most companies. We have a recommendation system that we built that uses collaborative filtering in order to really figure out for a student, given that you've taken the following set of classes, what are the other classes that you might be interested in? And so the notion of recommending courses to users is actually one of our most powerful ways for getting people to find the content that they're really interested in. But in fact, we can go beyond that. It's not just recommendations of courses. Maybe what we need to do is we need to recommend individualized content within courses to students. And so that's one of the efforts that we're currently working to address is how can we go and look at the availability of content within individual courses. Over here on the right, I've also talked a bit about how we use data not just to do experimentation and just to understand students, but in fact to perhaps personalize the experience. And I'm going to use a little bit of a terrible analogy. So I don't know, do any of you play a game called fantasy football? Okay. So I have a couple friends who play fantasy football, and I actually don't know too much about football, but nonetheless, I play with them all the time, and just as a social activity. And what turns out to be the case is year after year, my team sucks. It always gets destroyed. So game after game, I lose every game. But the nice thing is that the fantasy football site that my friends and I use happens to have a really nice personalized algorithm that will tell me after every single game exactly what I did wrong. It'll tell me like, oh, I feel your pain, you lost by 0.15 points yet again for the 3rd week in a row. If only you had done this, it would have been better. The thing that's really fascinating to me about that is like when I go to any of my friends who are in this fantasy football league, they say, we don't care about your team, that's your problem, right? But for me, this is kind of eye-opening. This is, I kind of feel that my only friend in this fantasy football league is really this computer. Right? So can you imagine though, like if we could do the exact same thing for education? Is it possible to take a classroom experience, use machine learning algorithms to really dive into the details of what students are doing, and then offer them a really personalized experience? And that's one of the hopes that I think would be awesome if we could deliver on. And then finally, I'll point out something that's a little bit unique to Coursera, and this derives from the fact that Coursera works not only with students, but we also work with a lot of partner institutions. We're a platform. And because we're a platform, data has kind of a unique role as a product for us at Coursera. So on the left here, I've shown some graphs of how we use data in order to inform how we construct peer grading assessments, how we can prove to ourselves that peer graders are actually sometimes, if you have enough peer graders, they may actually be more reliable than an equivalent expert TA grader in a class. On the right, I've shown some plots that relate to item response theory, which is a set of techniques that you can use to refine the quality of questions in a quiz or an exam. So both of these are examples of cases where we're presenting data to universities, to instructors at universities, helping them to improve their content. So here, the data itself is the product that we care about. Okay. So finally, I'll just close it with, we're hiring here at Coursera, so if you're looking for a position, please contact me.
Great, thank you, Bill. So Tom, some of those graphs and charts that you showed are really fascinating. Is any of that confidential information? Because you do know I'm a reporter here.
Oh, no. We're actually very open about.
I'm just kind of kidding.
We're open about all of our data. So.
Great. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're going to move into the discussion section of this of our panel now. And one of the things that I think unifies us is that I think we're all, despite the fact that we all work in, we all focus on different audiences, that we want to improve education as a whole. And if I may ask, how many of you in the audience have ever fallen asleep in a classroom? Right? I mean, I think that's almost all of you. Great, and so, I think with innovations like these today, I'm hoping that we will move, to a future where every kid is totally engaged and locked in and self-motivated, to learn at his or her own pace, thanks to the data-driven technologies that we've covered. I want to start off with, just giving a little more broad overview of some of the bigger trends in education technology for those of you who may not be familiar. How many of you here are teachers? Okay, yeah, not very many. So, I think a little broad overview may help. And the way I want to do this is to imagine that we had a baby. Okay, let's hypothesize that we had a baby, and it's a female baby because there's no males on this panel. We have a daughter, and so. As she grows up, what are the kinds of medias and technologies that she has at her disposal now that she can learn from that may not have been available to her, when we were kids, or maybe when some of you were kids. So let's start with you, Dylan, since Leo's pad kind of targets more of the young, the early childhood space. Let's say what kinds of tools or media is available to our hypothetical daughter.
The ginormous gorilla is mobile technologies. Anybody who's handed a smartphone to an infant is like bewildered at how the infant is just they can get to everything, they can engage with it. It's so intuitive that it feels almost like it's instinctive. And the beauty of that is that it gives us a chance to elicit interesting behaviors from really young learners and even help just make visible to parents what they're capable of. One of the biggest problems with kids is that before they're sophisticatedly verbal, we can't tell how much incredible work is going on in their brains. But if you can put something in front of them and watch them solve a problem and complete a task, then you're blown away as a parent. It lights up your heart.
And what are some of the insights, data-driven insights that are available now to parents or teachers that may not have been available a decade ago?
In the pre-K space, you don't really have much going on with ed tech in the classroom. A lot of early learning educators are, I think, appropriately cautious about embracing wholeheartedly the technological affordances of mobile devices. They want instead for their kids to get their hands dirty, to be working with blocks and stuff like that, and that's excellent. But it is also true that those kids are going to be going home and they're going to be playing on their parents' iPads or tablet devices of various make or phones or whatever. What we're trying to build actually at Codecademy is a way of making sense of all of those experiences so that when the kids get to kindergarten, the kindergarten teacher on the first day has a year's worth or more of high-dimensional psychometric data on that learner because we've been engaged in continuous embedded assessment in situated context. The kid is just engaging in naturalistic ways, but we're able to understand a bit about where the kid is, about whether the kid is like off the charts in spatial reasoning or really struggling with sequencing or inhibition control. And those kinds of insights save a teacher months of time because for the most part in kindergarten you get a kid and maybe you had an older brother or sister come through and you're like, oh yeah, little Johnny's gonna be a pain in the ass. But you spend a couple months just kind of getting the vibe of your class, It would be great if instead you had a much better bead on where each child was and what the classroom as a whole looked like so that you could start from there.
Great. And so, moving along, our daughter is going into K-12 space now. Maybe she's going to a public school. And so then, based on your work at Clever, you're kind of like the middleman, between the schools and the vast array of products and tools out there. Can you give us, just a brief sense of the different kinds of available tools that she may encounter?
Definitely. So I think we'll talk about two things. One is a quick overview of some tools that are pretty exciting, and then also how those tools are actually enabling brand new school models that are pretty exciting as well. So you think about tools that are now available in the K-12 space. There's, maybe some of us grew up with like number munchers or Oregon Trail, things that were a lot of fun, but there was our teachers weren't basing their classroom instruction around how we did on Oregon Trail. Today, there's lots of tools that are just as engaging, just as exciting, maybe better graphics and more fun than Oregon Trail, but are also giving teachers incredible insights into where their students are, and are really full curriculum. So students who are blazing ahead can go ahead and even though they're in first grade, can be learning math concepts, getting previews of things in third and fourth grade if they're ready for it. And the same way can meet students at their pace. So if there's a student who is struggling with English but also needs math instruction, there's some great non-verbal math pieces of software that could, even if your English skills aren't great, you can still develop the math concepts you need to be successful in that subject. So across the board, especially in math and reading, there's great adaptive learning software. There's great tools for assessment so that, when I was teaching, I would pass out tests. I would get back this massive stack of papers. It would sit in my car trunk for a week, and eventually I'd get around to grading it on a very painful Sunday and then give kids some feedback. Now, there's amazing online assessments that students can get instant feedback. Teachers can get great data analytics in front of them. So those are just a few of the things that are available in schools. I think one of the things that's most exciting, though, is that once you have these tools available, do we really need, there's a lot of assumptions that we make in the school environment that maybe don't need to be there. So one school network that I'm incredibly excited about, it's just around here, Summit Public Schools in San Jose and in Redwood City. They have said, because there's so much ability for students to learn at their own pace, let's get rid of grade levels. So they have high schools and middle schools that say, to be in 7th grade, you need to learn these concepts, but if you can learn them faster, that's great. You get to go and move on to the 8th grade concepts right away. And as a result, students are really able to drive their own learning and it's about what you know, not how fast you know it. Yeah. Another great example, also in this neighborhood, Rocket Ship is doing lots of innovation in elementary, where students are spending time on the computer every day and also spending time with great instructors.
Awesome, great. So Donna's graduated from K-12, thanks partially to Dan's API. She doesn't have to remember logins as much anymore, and she went to college. And so Tom, you deal with Coursera, one of the, perhaps the biggest MOOC provider in the world. What are some of the online learning opportunities that she may be exposed to while she's in school?
So there are a lot of different online learning opportunities today that have just kind of arisen in the last few years. Coursera is one of them. So I think one of the things that's kind of remarkable about it is today, or actually maybe around 10 years ago, if you wanted to learn material from a college class, your only option was either to pick up a college textbook or to actually take a college class. Today, with Coursera and with other types of MOOC providers, you can actually get a top-notch education from anywhere. One of the things that's even perhaps underappreciated here in the United States is that there's a larger global population of students out there who have actually even more limited access due to geographic restrictions, for instance. And so for them, the impact of Coursera is incredible. I believe that right now, I think roughly somewhere around 2/3 to 3/4 of our student population is international, not from the U.S. And so just access is, I think, one of the big drivers of change here in education.
Great, thanks Tom. And so moving along, our daughter's graduated, but let's say she graduated like me with a degree in history, and she's going through a little bit of a midlife crisis. She can't really find a job, she doesn't know what to do. And so, Changtao, what kinds of other learning opportunities or adult learning opportunities does she have with things like Codecademy or others?
Yeah, sure. I think there are a lot of opportunities. I just echo what Tom just mentioned. I think, going forward, I think content will be very accessible and it's going to be commoditized. And you can learn how to fix your disposer. Like by watching a YouTube video, you can go to like Coursera to learn a lot of the other material. And I think for the daughter, I want to teach her coding because I think since she doesn't know what she wants to do, maybe like I would imagine she wants to do some design work. So work in the fashion industry, and but it's hard to get a job in the fashion industry. And so but my daughter wants to start her own website. She's very creative, and she wants to learn coding because she thinks she can just build a website herself. And Codecademy is a great resource, and there are of course a lot of the resources. But I think two primary things. One, content will be very accessible. So what will be different is how efficient you will learn. So personalization is definitely one key, and because everybody have different kind of learning pace, different background. Some people can learn like math faster. Some people can learn like art faster. So everybody is different, and that's why I think you need a specific like a dedicated tool, dedicated environment to teach people in a personalized way.
Great. And going along with that, let's say she finishes a Codecademy course and she finds that she really likes coding and she wants to get a job. And so the question I have is, how does online learning kind of change the way we think about credentialing and accreditations, right? Because one of the main reasons that many people take courses like Codecademy is that it's for a career change. And so are employers, from what you've seen, starting to take these kinds of informal learning opportunities seriously?
Yeah, so I think definitely one of the huge advantages of online education is being able to track a lot of the user activity, being able to collect those data, enable us to be able to say, tell how well a student is learning. For instance, you can imagine like traditionally in a classroom, like teachers have to wait until like every midterm or final to assess how well their students learn. But with online education, you'll be able to measure every step and just give you direct feedback. So that's definitely a big trend, and you can see a lot of the employer, big company. So when they have their corporate training program, they want to see how effective they are spending their money for it. So they spend like $1 million to use some platform to train their employee. They want to see the result. So everybody wants to see the result. It was due to technology difficulty that traditionally we cannot do that. But now I think it's a time for us to build good model and automate those, and in a very implicit way. You don't have to explicitly ask or take quiz, have students to take quiz. You just measure and you know.
And then Tom, going back to you and the universities. Coursera, I believe, works with over 100 universities. And so, what is your take on, let's say, the value of, let's say, a Coursera degree or a Coursera certificate versus a paper diploma from like a Stanford University?
So a couple things. So I'm going to address this in, I guess, two different areas. So the first is that Coursera certificates today, we offer essentially two different types of certificates. So one type of certificate is known as part of our signature track program. So this is a single course that you might take online, and at the end of this course, if you have passed all the requirements, then you end up with a certificate that you can then show to employers, to family and friends. Another type of certificate that we very recently launched early this year was something called a specialization certificate. So a specialization certificate corresponds to putting together a string of classes that form some type of coherent program sequence. One thing that I think is actually kind of very interesting about these that differ a lot from, say, a university degree is that a university degree is much more about breadth, about like an entire undergraduate experience. Whereas a lot of the certificates that we're offering here are very, very focused on very narrow subjects. So that's kind of the first aspect. The other thing that I want to bring up as well is that with the types of certificates that we're able to produce, and because the medium is online, this actually gives us great opportunities for showing proof of work in some way for the students who participate. So for instance, if I were taking if I were an English major, for instance, then the onus would be on me to save all my assignments throughout my undergraduate major in order to show them to employers. But here, because all of our interactions are done online, then they're in a form that's easily capturable that you can then put together into some type of online portfolio. So I think both of these will make certificates much more focused and also a bit more clear to employers as to what is the value of the credential. They can actually see the portfolio of work.
Great, thanks.
I want to piggyback on that because it's another benefit of the revolution in online education that outside of credentialing there is the work product. So I imagine you get a ton of resumes. Oh, this is where I was. This is what I've learned. What's much more interesting for us is here's what I've done. Here's what I can do. So you can see. So maybe our daughter went to Codecademy and she nailed it. She made that website and it's beautiful. I, as an employer, don't care about the credential, but I want to see the work, right? I want to see the website. I want to play with the website. I want to say, yeah, this feels snappy. I like this. So that, I think, is a way of sort of leapfrogging the credentialing question, because what we really care about is not where you've been, it's what you can do. And if you can show that to me, it's better than saying, well, I went to Stanford, and I can say, well, a lot of people went to Stanford, good stuff, so maybe you did good stuff.
And moving into the K-12 space, right? So there's all this data that we can collect and that we can offer to the teachers and the administrators who are in charge. But then, from your experience, there's a lot of data passes through Clever. Are they able to make sense of all that data? Is that data actionable? And if not, what kinds of different training or help do they need to really provide meaningful and actionable insights from all this data that's being
Yeah, I think we're just getting started in K-12. So yeah, there's a vision of the Netflix school where there's these amazing recommendation algorithms, and a student walks in and the algorithm tells them exactly what they should be working on that second. And there's some cool experiments that show that there's a lot of promise to that vision, but we're not there yet. And I think that before we even talk about teacher professional development, there's just some core data things that need to get addressed. So one of the things that Clever does that we found to be incredibly useful is just giving a stable and unique identifier to every student. And so that can be shared across the different applications the student uses, and it's just this long ID that allows their data to be collated from different places. The other trend, sort of politically controversial, but from I think a data standpoint really essential, is the Common Core. So if we don't as a country agree on what students should be learning, that in 4th grade you learn about fractions and it has this certain tag to it, it's really difficult to think about how we can analyze data if there's different standards on every single state. So having unique identifiers, having aligned content, and then enabling kind of easy interchange between applications and providers. That's where Clever comes in. So those are kind of like the core bases that we need before we even talk about building great dashboards and helping teachers drive their instruction. So I think we're still doing a lot of the infrastructure. There's definitely also a lot of great work in kind of trailblazing schools where teachers are learning. And I think if you give teachers great tools, teachers are even like all teachers are data driven. Every teacher has a grade book. They understand where their students are. They're using data to track their students' progress. And it's just building on that skill.
And so when it comes to teaching, in the K-12 space, or even teaching our, very young kids as a parent, traditionally we think of teaching as an art form, as an intuitive thing, and that there are some things that you just know from talking and communicating with a child about that child that you may not be able to derive from a program, or that may be wrong. So, going to you, Dylan, how do you try to negotiate this balance between data-driven intuitions about a child's learning progress versus what a parent or a teacher may get from social contact?
It is a big danger, actually, that if we solve the problem that Dan was just talking about, and we become really good at telling teachers where kids are and what kids need, teachers will sort of check out and say, yeah, the computer said so. There's actually a research literature on the erosion of expertise in fields where enough automation has taken place that you can just sort of put it on autopilot, literally. Pilots are having more errors these days than they have 50 years ago because they work like they do their job less. They're just mailing it in and the program is flying wherever. If the program breaks, they're hosed. So I think that's actually a big danger. But That's a big danger that would be a good danger to have because it would mean we'd solve the problem that Dan was talking about, right? That we're actually making good recommendations based on data. And at this point, like you said, we can show a bunch of numbers and say, we've counted this many times that your learner did this. We can't really say what to do next, in K-12.
I think there's also a huge place for qualitative observations in any sort of data system, and so the inputs shouldn't just be the Kidaptives and the Codecademy. There should also be places where teachers can put in observations and rubrics and add that to really give a full picture of how the students do it.
And as all four of you, I think adaptive learning was a phrase that made it into your presentations. And as your team builds various algorithms and models for adaptive learning and machine learning algorithms for how students learn, what are some of the assumptions that you kind of build, that you build in to these models as you crunch out these algorithms that try to best predict how students learn and maybe what their weaknesses are and where they should go next?
So there's a whole field on computer adaptive testing, but I want to mention a particular idiosyncratic thing that we do at Kidaptive. We're presenting learners with assessments in all kinds of crazy contexts. They could be sitting quietly in the living room by themselves, working, concentrating, or they could have their big brother kicking them in the head, or they could be in the back of a car, or they could be at a restaurant, or they could be on an airplane, they could be sitting with mom and dad who are helping, they could be sitting with a babysitter who might be steering them wrong. So there's a ton of stuff going on, which means it's a very noisy signal. No one measurement or set of measurements is gospel. You need that continuous embedded assessment to get anything approaching a signal that you're sort of confident in.
Right, Cheng-Tao, you pointed out something.
Yeah, so in Codecademy, I want to mention this is just the modeling is under development. So like this is assumptions I'm making, but it's not validated yet. So two assumptions I'm making. One is I think that because we have we have different courses like JavaScript course, Python course, Ruby course. One assumption I'm making is if people know about Ruby for loop, then they kind of know something about Python for loop, and they kind of know something about JavaScript for loop. And I try to draw connection between those for loop as a hidden connection. And also, like another thing I do take into consideration is the exercise 2 is more difficult than exercise 1. Exercise 3 is more difficult than exercise 2. So the more, like, if you are like making correct submission to the later exercise, you are more advanced. So I think those are the two major assumptions we are making.
So I'll add one thing to this. So for Coursera, we have today we don't have a ton of machine learning algorithms in practice in our production code. However, there are a lot of places where modeling assumptions come in, not just in terms of algorithms and models, but also like the metrics that we care about and the way that we assess ourselves. And one big assumption that we make today, which is actually a very bad assumption, that we're trying to move past, is the idea that all learners who come to the Coursera platform are the same, right? We know that this is not true. We know that people come in from different backgrounds, from different demographics. They have different intents. Some students just want to watch our lecture videos. Some students really, really want that certificate. Some students really just want to do all the assessments but don't care about the lecture videos at all. So we have a lot of different types of learners who come through our platform. And a big modeling assumption that I think is often made is that you can group all these people together and then measure progress for everybody on the same scale, but it doesn't really work because it doesn't take into account the intent of the learner.
And going to assumptions and intent, I think one of the biggest criticisms of things like Coursera that people riff on is that they have very low completion rate. I think that's built on an assumption that people who start courses should always finish them. How many people here have actually finished a MOOC? That's actually a much higher percentage than I think the national average. But as you go through your data analytics and you see how users are interacting and solving assessment questions and watching videos, what do you think is the future of the development of MOOCs to try to drive up the student engagement and maybe perhaps the completion rates?
Sure. So a couple things here. So one is, first, we really need to much better understand our users. So today, like I said, a lot of the assumptions that we make are that all the users are the same. Whereas if we had the ability to really understand the different types of interests that people have or the goals that people have coming into different courses, then we could deliver a much more personalized experience. And then that would be one that's much more suitable on a personal level. Another thing that I want to bring up is the idea that, even though there is a lot of criticism of retention in MOOCs, I don't think I've ever heard the criticism made of a library that, the quality of a library is based on the proportion of, books that you check out that you reach, you read all the way to the end. That doesn't seem like the right metric. And so what that indicates to me is that today, when we're thinking about MOOCs, and the fact that they're in some sense kind of like an electronic textbook of sorts, we really don't actually even have quite the right metrics to think about. We don't really know the right way to measure the value that students are getting. So this is, I think, one of the big challenges that we'll have to address.
I think we are facing similar problems, and actually, I shouldn't say it's a problem. So there are a few things we are thinking. So first, if you measure the throughput, so we reach a lot more audiences than a lot of the classroom can reach. So, but we are not highly personalized, and people who are using Codecademy are not as committed as students who are going to do their coursework because they have to pass their class. And again, every students are different. Some of them are more motivated, some of them are less motivated. Some of them just want to come to your site and check it out because he or she heard about, oh, this is something cool. So we don't intend to convert those users to our very highly engaged users because they are not ready for it yet. Just like when you go to Google, if you are searching for Nikon blah blah camera, you are probably more ready to purchase this than just search for camera. So everybody has a different phase. Some of them are more ready to take online courses, some of them are not. So you need to be able to differentiate the user intention and the measure separately so that that's the way it is. Who are your highest paying customer? Who are your just the browser? So you don't want to treat them the same.
Berkeley?
Yeah, let me just add one thing to this notion. There's one way that we have found so far that works pretty reliably for inferring student intent, which is to understand which of our users come through the signature track program. So students who actually pay and actually are intending to try to finish the course. In those cases, we see a lot of classes where the retention rate is anywhere from 90 to 95%. So it's actually quite different when you look at the right population.
And I know we're about to move into the audience Q&A portion of our discussion, but I'd like to end off with one general question for all of you. So the title of this panel is The Revolution in Online Education. But, as I said, I was a history major at one point, and I know that not all revolutions necessarily turn out for the best, right? I think that in America, we like to assume that revolutions are always for the better. So, when it comes to education, what are some of the remaining obstacles and challenges that we have to be aware of so that the revolution that we're talking about can actually achieve a lot of the goals that we just discussed? I'll start with you, Dylan.
I'm going to go back to the point I touched on earlier, which is that there is a danger in a certain kind of success. And the example I'm going to use is a way of analyzing teacher performance that's called value-added modeling. The idea is, well, if you just use year-end test scores, then the privileged students in the privileged schools are always going to score better, so the teachers will look like they're better teachers. So instead, you should take into account where the students are coming in, and then you should measure sort of their expected trajectory of growth. Oh, for you guys, I should do it this way. And then you should see how much above or below that the teacher was able to sort of move the student. And at first blush, it seems like a really nice, sort of thoughtful way to do it. But it turns out to be terrible in practice. But that doesn't matter because a bunch of legislatures got really excited about it, and they legislated, they mandated that teacher performance has to include 20% value-added modeling, this and that. Even though the underlying models aren't doing anything, they're just spitting noise back into the system. In fact, there have been studies that have shown that value-added modeling can predict 4th grade math scores based on 5th grade input. which doesn't make any, it's clearly not causal. Like your fourth grade teacher your fifth grade teacher isn't affecting your fourth grade math scores, right? So there is a danger that if we get too far along this road, people will begin to put too much faith. They'll begin to mistake facts for truth, and we'll end up sort of going down blind alleys.
Dan, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so the thing that worries me, the thing that could like bring out the guillotines in this revolution would be it's privacy. So especially in K-12, students and parents have a lot of concerns about where their data is going and where it's being shared, and what, as students use more software, is that being used for the intent to serve the student and educate them, or for maybe other reasons. And so I think it's incredibly important that everyone who's involved in the K-12 space really pays attention and does a great job of security and privacy, both in taking care of student data and being great stewards and making sure that it is only used to help students learn, and also in messaging and explaining what data inputs are coming in, what data outputs are coming out, and being really transparent about that, so that students can learn and teachers can teach and parents can feel really comfortable about that. But I think that we've done too much innovation without explaining, and I think we've some catching up to do in terms of how data is being used.
There's a cautionary tale about that in EdSurge this week, about a company called InBloom. You guys can check into it if you want to see how it can go badly.
Great. Tom, do you have any thoughts on what your biggest fears or challenges are going forward?
Sure, I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of us face, especially Coursera for instance, is that there's actually the field of educational research is not new. People have been working in this for a long time, and so I think we have a lot of catching up to do, where the technology needs to catch up with the state of pedagogical research and vice versa, in order for us to really figure out what actually works in classrooms, what really doesn't work in the online classroom, for instance. One of the big dangers is as we think about big data, as we think about predictive modeling, are we just going to simply forget the lessons that tons of pedagogical researchers in the years past have already figured out long ago, or can we actually build upon the work that they did before to actually improve education? So I think that's going to be one of the big challenges.
Really thought so. Chantal, do you want to?
Yeah, I think there's always I fear there is not enough innovation, and I don't fear people make stupid mistake by misunderstood the data. It has happened all the time, and that doesn't stop innovation. That's not an excuse to stop innovation, because fearing people make the wrong use of data. So, but to me, I think as we understand more and more about online education, this is a little bit echoing what Tom just mentioned. There are a lot of the gap between what has done traditionally for classroom setting versus what has done for the online education. So there's a lot of things we don't understand. So I do feel like people might jump into some early conclusion which might be falsified later. But actually, in terms of education theory, it has been false. Many theory has been falsified later on. Whatever works here doesn't work there. So we just need to spend much more time, just keep studying in the research, because it's such a core things we need to improve. Otherwise, that's probably the easiest way we can improve our life. So better education. So why, if you want to spend your time working on something, why not working on this?
Thank you. So now it's your turn. If you guys have any questions, pass you guys a mic.
I'll pass on the mic. There are two questions, really. One is addressing the privacy concern. It's not just K-12 that collects data. If we move into a data-driven education system, by the time we get into the workforce, we'll have anywhere from 18 to maybe 25 years worth of data. So how do you address the privacy of the data as it moves from an early education system to a K-12 system to possibly, graduate school and later? And the other one is, a lot of the time, this is a revolution, but online learning is not new. How are you leveraging those early experiments, those early successes and failures?
I'll speak to the first question first. I think you need to put data in the hands of the parents when students are young, and then in the hands of the students as they get older. So it shouldn't be like, I have no insight or control into what Google and DoubleClick know about me as they target ads. And I don't think that that's the world we can get into for educational data. The data needs to be shown and owned by the learner. And so if we have this case where the learner sees the data, they can control it, they can control how they share it. We're building tools to enable that future with Clever. Then it's the person's in control of the privacy and control of the data. It's an asset. It's not something to be worried about or scared of.
Does someone want to tackle the second question of why MOOCs are different than distance learning in the past, a couple decades ago?
So I'm not sure about why MOOCs are different from distance learning in the past. I wanted to, I guess, tackle something a bit more direct, which was you were asking how are you going to build on the innovations of the past in order to provide better education in the future, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. So within Coursera, today our initial version of the platform was created very much to sort of transplant the in-classroom experience online. And so we know that this is not the end game by any means. A lot of what we're working towards building today are to really incorporate, to build software that can actually incorporate a lot of the teaching methodologies that are well known. So for instance, mastery learning, for instance. Mastery learning is the idea where you don't really get to move on until you've really mastered a concept. And by gating progression in a way, you can really encourage learners to get a very good understanding of the fundamentals. This is something that's actually really perfect for the online setting where an online website isn't going to grow bored waiting for you to try to master every concept. It's there. It'll wait. It'll allow you to go at your own pace. So those are some of the types of concepts. Other things that we should be doing as well as when we build our platforms, platform providers like Coursera have a responsibility not just to put classes online, but also to really be very thoughtful about how we construct the platform to make it as easy as possible for instructors to create content that leverages research-based methodologies for pedagogy. So, mastery learning shouldn't be something that an instructor has to simply contort to get to work on our system. It should be something that's built in and just natural and easy to use.
Yeah, to add a little bit on that, so two things. So one for the privacy, you should check out something called COPPA, C-O-P-P-A, and second, for how to leverage traditional learning theory. Mastery learning is definitely one, and there are a lot more, like say I know Codecademy use learners systems like flashcard systems. So I think online education it's not against the traditional learning theory. So we have the chance to apply those theory and collect feedback in a large scale. So then we'll be able to generalize the theory much better. So if it works great. We are looking for inspiration from traditional theory, and also the flipped classroom model, and it could be another example. So and also what's the other one? Let's say item response theory. So we can enhance that because traditionally it kind of assume when students are taking exam, so their skill doesn't change. But we are different like this when for online education, when students take exam and they are learning and taking exam at the same time. So they are learning, they are changing their skill. So we have a chance to base upon those existing theory and apply something new to it and validate at the large scale.
Elif, you got it right?
Yeah, I want to follow up on something you said, Tony, about companies accepting online learning, the degree to which they accept it and what value they see in this. And a possible scenario that I'm thinking about here is that companies, as they increasingly become involved in online learning and MOOCs and so on, which Google and AT&T and a number of big companies are getting involved. And I know that Udacity has a program, Open Learning Alliance, where they're working with a number of different companies. AT&T is working with Georgia Institute of Technology and providing some really interesting stuff. But what I think this opens up for is the possibility that these companies will now want the data, all the data that is generated as these corporate and these could be corporate employees, are taking these courses. So they want to know how these students learn at the micro level and what the implications are of these companies getting access to that type of data to use to see how do our employees learn at different points in the learning activities they go through. What are the implications of that long term for how companies will evaluate employees and getting access to all this data? I haven't seen that being explored, and that intrigues me.
That's a very deep question.
There was an article either in the Atlantic or the Pacific Standard, one of those two, about like the future of work. And it's basically completely metrics-driven work stuff. So it talked about how in the 50s we thought, oh, we were going to make the perfect workplace, and we we're going to measure this and measure that, and figure out who was going to be, leadership potential when they were 20. We were going to groom them, etc.
Yeah.
And then that didn't work very well, and then we sort of veered away from it. And now we're coming back toward it because big data offers that promise. It tells employers that they could get a much better sense for who their all-stars are going to be. So that's a good thing to look into. But it's also a danger because their interests are not often going to align with those of the employee. So as Dan said, if we're not really careful to sort of carve out a space and say these data belong to the learners or to their parents, then you're gonna get predatory behavior. You're gonna get people acting in their short-term best interest, which doesn't benefit in the long term themselves or the employees.
But you see, you think it's likely that we will have, data, that we will own the data and we can control it, that there'll be accepted
Not with that legislation.
protocols and so on around that? I don't see that.
One of actually the long-term goals of Codecademy is to help create those kinds of protocols and to help establish those kinds of standards. But as I said, it'll require political will.
Let me add a little bit to that because that's very interesting. So one thing is that I can see data would be used to make a lot of things more efficient. And I also want to, just along with that direction, I want to teach back another interesting question. So what do you think if everybody can code? So like there's an article and like the main point is after industry revolution, so people build machines. Machine and human complement each other because machine needs human to operate and make human more productive. But then like what if everybody can code and everybody can automate their job? So we make things more efficient, but what would happen next? Do we still need a lot of the human labor to do things, or like what will happen? That's actually another very interesting idea.
Who's got the mic next? Yeah, right.
So I have a question to Tom. Actually, I really love Coursera and just review material as a continuous education myself. And one frustration I had the other day was course closes, and I can't go back and then watch the great lecture I was interested in reviewing, and will do some exercise more going back to brush my skill. And so so I started to wonder, because you both value on certification as well as accessibility, what's the balance, because you won't have certain control over accessibility of course, exercise and exam, to produce some quality among the people who, finish the course. At the same time, you want to make the course accessible whenever you want to learn.
That is a great question. I don't know the answer to this question. So one thing that I will point out is that right now, even internally at Coursera, one of the big things that we're really looking to try to figure out is how can we get more content in the hands of learners. So I think the experience that you had where a course finished and the course closed off and the content was no longer available, it's actually inconsistent depending upon the course. So a lot of those decisions are made on a course-by-course basis through talking with the institutions that we work with or through with the instructors, for instance. And it also has some bearing on credentialing, like you said. So we don't really know the answer to it. A lot of that is an area of active research for us.
Great, next question.
First of all, thank you. Thank you very much for coming and doing what you're doing. It's fantastic. My question is, thank you very much again for doing what you're doing. I really appreciate it. My question is, what do you think needs to change outside of online education to make it successful? Because many of us appreciated our college time, not only for education, but for the environment, for people who were around us. And generally, what happens if people are sitting in front of their computers and lose this part, as well as there are some other parts which are challenging. If students go at their own pace, how do they react to the progress of one versus another?
Dan brought up a couple of good examples, Summit and Rocketship, both of which are using computers to automate the sort of lower level stuff, the skill and drill stuff, procedural fluency, factual knowledge, so that the teachers have more time to spend with the students in collaborative work, building cross-functional teams, exploring areas of particular interest, personalizing into specialized groups. So you might have 45 students, which seems like a hell of a lot of students for one teacher to manage. But if they're working in pods and you get to sit with 15 of them at a time, now all of a sudden you're at the level where the class size reduction research shows you're making a bigger difference by connecting on a human level outside of a technological context with those kids.
Hey, first thanks for having this panel. So definitely there is a revolution happening in this kind of online industry. So since you are in the industry, do you think there is a support from the government sector, like from the legislative side, to encourage this? Because like education is not the new one; it is there for a long time, and it's like government is always towards that. But I don't know, for the last 3 weeks, it's in the news. The California Bureau of Private Education and Post-Secondary, they sent a cease and desist notice to 7 Codecademy kind of boot camps in California. So it's kind of like one side there is a revolution happening, and one side the government want to implement, bring the code of conduct to this level. So where we are and what's going.
So I guess the question you're trying to get at is like what is the role of existing regulating agencies in, let's say, trade schools or higher education schools, and how's that going to be affected by online education?
I just want to say I'm really excited about some of the steps the federal government's taken towards supporting online and blended learning in K-12. So you mentioned the kind of crackdown in California on code schools, but at the same time, in the State of the Union, Obama talked about improving broadband access, which is one of the biggest problems I think in the country. That there are so many schools and so many students that don't have a decent. They're using dial-up modems or a single T1 for an entire high school, and so there's a ton of effort and energy and both private and public dollars going towards making sure all of our schools are wired. They have the wireless access points and the devices that students need to learn online. So I'm really excited, and by that, I think that kind of infrastructure is a great. Helping build that kind of infrastructure is a great place for the government to step in, but certainly there are other places where maybe it's more of a challenge.
Yeah, Chantel, do you deal with regulating agencies or those kinds of issues?
Kind of. So like we got a lot of support. So like President Obama also like mentioned like everybody should learn how to code, and also like in UK we have seen like they are gonna have a computing curriculum in the high school curriculum since starting September, and there are a lot of other governments also like want to work with us about like bringing CS, computer science education to their country. So like at least from the from Codecademy, like we have seen a lot of the push from like governments to support their students to learn coding.
Great. Thank you guys for sharing all your experiences tonight. I have a bit more of a practical question as a early stage ed tech entrepreneur myself around revenue models. And I heard a little bit of mention from Dan and about where you guys are getting some of your revenue, but I was just curious your kind of insights and experiences on how hard or easy it is from either parents on the K-12 side or getting money from schools and districts or Coursera in your experience. So.
Who wants to start?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. So for Coursera, I mean, revenue is important to us. We are a for-profit company, but for us, I think the way that we really think about revenue is we think of it as a means to sustainability. We don't want to have a company that's simply producing educational content under some type of grant or general support. We want to actually be able to show that it can hold water all on its own. As far as like the difficulties, it's by no means easy. We have a couple different efforts today. We are exploring the signature track program. We're exploring the specializations program that I talked about earlier for providing these little mini credentials. A lot of them have shown quite a lot of promise, and I think we haven't really even quite figured out whether these are the right models that we can use to get to sustainability or not. And there are a lot of other possibilities as well. So for instance, besides just simply credentialing, we could potentially help match students to employers. For instance, if a student is really interested in getting a job, maybe there are things that we can do based on the information that we have that can match them to an appropriate employer. Or there may be things that we could do in terms of licensing content. We could perhaps help one university share its content with another university for some type of fee. It's not entirely clear which of these models will pan out, but there are a lot of challenges we're definitely trying.
Right, and Dylan and Dan, a lot of the tools that we both see in K-12 are free, right? But these are startups that have raised, some of whom have raised significant amounts of funding. So, how are those going to live? How are they going to make back their 10x returns?
Just keep engaging more users. As long as they do that, they never need to monetize.
Right.
Yeah, in seriousness, there is as much innovation going on in the space of business models within EdTech as there is in the sort of pedagogical space of EdTech. On Monday, Tony and I were at a launch party for gamesandlearning.org, and one of the undercurrents throughout the night was different business models that EdTech entrepreneurs are trying out. There's pricing at the district level, at the school level, at the classroom level, at the student level, with parents. There's rev shares, there's licensing, there's all kinds of experiments that are going on right now because everybody's really excited to help kids and everybody's really excited to try to figure out how to feed themselves while they're helping kids. There are some things that are emerging that are bad ideas. There are some things that are emerging that are okay ideas. Trying to get little kids to buy 1,000 Smurf berries once their parents' iTunes password is submitted is a bad idea.
Yeah, so Clever has an interesting business model where we charge developers who make EdTech applications. But one of the things that we're really excited about is making it easier for people who make software and want to sell it into the K-12 market, make it easier for folks to make those sales. And so we actually did a bit of an experiment, which was very early and had some exciting signs, but didn't take off too much with EdSurge, where we did a program, Try Before You Buy, with Clever and EdSurge. So if you're a teacher or you're a principal and you see an exciting app in EdSurge, you could, with a couple of clicks, get a 60-day or 90-day trial of that application, try it out in some classrooms, and without having to make any purchases or invest IT resources, because Clever makes that part easy, decide if it's a good fit. And so just helping districts and schools become more innovative and have a more rapid purchasing cycle, because right now it is too slow, and really great companies have died on the vine because they've had a great product, but they just couldn't get the sales cycle moving fast enough to support their growth.
So I also want to mention that's one of the reasons, revenue is one of the reasons why I joined Codecademy, because I believe coding is a high value add to, it inherently has a lot of value. And without knowing like what you want to build, I think pick the right market and provide a lot of value is the key. So then like you don't have to worry about which revenue model you want to pick. Because internally we have many ways we are trying, and I just cannot reveal what we are trying, but yeah, I guess inherently if you have a lot of value added, then you shouldn't worry too much about it.
I think we have time for about one more question. You got a mic? All right.
Well, I'm lucky I'm the one who's going to close the thing. Revolution in online education, so I guess you guys are a bunch of revolutionaries here, and it's great to hear that. As in every revolution, some people are going to come ahead and some are going to die in the let's take a specific example, Stanford. How is that going to affect the tuition fees that we see at Stanford? What's going to happen with those big guys established, the Ivy League universities? What if you guys look in your crystal ball, what's going to happen with them?
Most pundits who are predicting great upheaval in higher education, they think that the Stanfords and Harvards are going to be okay. The ones that they're really concerned about are sort of the ones that are educating the bulk. The state universities that have huge volume of students, and the way that they're trying to differentiate their experience from that of a competitor school is that all the freshmen get iPads, or that they have a fitness center in every dorm, or things like that. When you attend a place like Stanford, you're getting some interesting courses and stuff. But really what you're getting is a connection with a whole bunch of other people who are awesome people. You have amazing discussions with them. You build lifelong relationships. You get this powerful network you go out into the world with. So that part of the value that you get from a Stanford degree isn't being threatened by the kinds of disruption that are happening right now.
One thing that I'll say to add to that is that actually, we have a lot of top universities working with us at Coursera. And part of the motivation there is they see this not as a threat, but rather as a way to innovate and to really embrace new technology. So an example is like, a number of different universities have classes that they teach online, but simultaneously teach the same class in an in-person classroom later. And so what they're doing is they're using the data that they collect through the online setting to really refine the classroom experience and deliver an even better classroom experience than they could before.
One interesting group of revolutionaries starting a pretty exciting experiment. You've heard of the Minerva Project? So the Minerva Project is a brand new startup university. It starts this fall. And it's starting very small, but the idea is to try to create a world-class university that is built in the world where there are Coursera's and Udacities and Codecademys and tools like that. So there's a lot of innovations, but students will be in different campuses around the world, and they'll have some online courses and some in-person courses and some, online in-person courses, simultaneous video conferences, kinds of things. So interesting idea. We'll see whether they might be able to actually challenge some of the established universities.
Great, Chantal.
So I think it's going to be huge impact, and I actually think very differently. So I think in terms of ROI, so return over investment. So we all know college tuition is increasing, and we all know after graduating your pay is decreasing, except for probably in Silicon Valley. So I think in the future it's not going to be whether the Stanford tuition is going to justify just for building the network or the amount of knowledge to learn. So it's going to be very different, and I think it's going to be people will try to pick a few skills they can make money or they can pay their rent for and just learn those. And those content will be readily accessible everywhere. And people will have a choice to just, I want to learn coding, I use Codecademy. I want to learn this design, I use some Coursera design course. So I think different skill people will try to learn different specific skill they are interested in without going to college.
All right, so on that note, I want to ask one quick fire question, and your answer will be in the form of a number. So talking about MOOCs and disruptions and how traditional college is going to react. Let's say 5 years from now, how many colleges are going to be out of business? How many colleges that exist now will be out of business 5 years from now?
Between 5 and 15%.
Okay.
I'm making it up. I do preschool. I don't know anything about college.
You can take this question as seriously as you like, or as not seriously as you like.
Maybe, I think the more interesting question might be how many new colleges spring up that already have models that never couldn't exist today.
Answer the question.
I have no idea.
I'm a statistician, so I think in terms of uncertainty, and my uncertainty goes from negative 100% to 100%. So who knows?
Okay, so we'll end on that note of ambivalence. Thank you so much. We'll all be sticking around for a little while. More questions, feel free to come up.
Thank you. I know many of you have other questions, so please come and engage with the panelists. Thank you for the great conversation. Thank you, Tony, for moderating this. And we look forward to other discussions.
Titanium.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm looking at this. Titanium.
You want help up, old man? Medium data. We got medium data. Yeah, we can't afford big data. Book us a lunch.
My question was going to be, what? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, book us a lunch.
Yeah, let's do lunch.
Still need the signaling mechanism.
Let's figure out like Friday or.
The Parato data science, I missed your presentation, but the second time I mentioned working on NLP. What kind of
That's why I said 17, but if you go to get covered, there's
social media or where do you work? So my company has like a user-generated e-commerce company. So users create their own designs and then upload it, and then we print it on mug cups or T-shirts or and then ship it to custom bags or Zazo and we already went public. Zazo is still private. I think our company went public well, and so that's why Zazo can't go public. Got stuck in the COVID situation. I think our mistake is we can so Codecademy is not a place for technology. So it's more than like Macy's or Best Buy or the user-generated design marked by number of products. Well, because we have to categorize so spam, protection. And then also, I did he was so I have to come so to AdWords. Yeah, bidding, yeah. So for that, I use programs, so those things and those combinations, and also normalizing and so it's a lot of work.
Some of our people are very
Because 300 million products, and then kind of we need some clustering or categorization, and then yeah, it's kind of very challenging. And also writing high performance, keywords not on wordness or
I just sent it to list my courses on your first interest.
Yeah. I
called you.
Yeah.
Just.
Yeah.
What do we do? Yeah. What's the I can be around 6 points. What people say about this? That's what I say. What people say. I think Stanford is no, that's assumed the so I think I have to send a couple of times email to you to list a couple of my courses on your class. Yeah, I did that. I talked to the postdocs. No, I talked to them and the postdocs. They are the most right. And I have a couple of courses that are online.
So what kind of techniques? So if I look at my US patent,
So how many, so now you also logged in, right? You can pick up
yeah, so we just launched it a couple of months ago. I joined administrating it a week ago.
So how many users have each separate or?
I mean, it's so monthly I get myself unique. And registrations I just started at 6,000. They were almost 100 a day. I have been promoted and really want to buy products. So I don't know if you
Yeah, I know a couple of things from your Facebook before I
yeah, so like if you, so that's where the difference between I'm very focused on that, and that's the difference between me and course. Like passive, I'm kind of active, and I get excited. And I try to be positive on it.
No, definitely. It's the same way. That is, I really started about one and a half years ago.
I started my first course.
Because you were calling, we did about the Coursera, YouTube channel. You probably, if you go compiler design, probably share with it. And then the startup will start with the compiler. These are based on that. No, I'm making